Welcome! I'm so glad you're here. I'm Gila Ross, parenting educator and coach, author of Living Beautifully and host of the Confident Parent podcast, bringing you the content you need to bring more ease, joy and love into your parenting so that you can show up as the parent you want to be to your children. The question that I want to try and answer this evening is, let me just kind of give you a roadmap of where we're going with this, right? We started with all these different, recognitions that we're giving our children, whether it's the Kodak moment, right? Which we're still trying to do, just check in with them and letting them know that we're noticing them, right? Without judgment, right? Like, I notice that you're coloring, or I notice that, you seem to be enjoying reading that book or whatever it is. We're setting foundations that of positivity, of showing our children that we love them and we notice them and that they can get our attention in healthy ways. And and where we're going with this is that we are then going to take because usually, if you think about it, I don't know, apologies to Becca, because I haven't yet got you the book. I keep meaning to, and I will, please God, bring it to you, but I'll show it to the screen so everyone can see. Right, so if you can look at page, I don't know what it is, 68, right? So you see, and you just need to see the picture, right? You see that little kid over there, could be anyone, right? And you see that there's kind of two buttons. And you press the one button, which is the good behavior button. And let's be honest, right? For most of us, they press the good button and, you get yay or whatever, right? But when you press the bad behavior button, right? Like, just imagine the time they snatch the toy from their sibling and make them yell, or they take permanent marker and color on your white couch, right? Boom, that's where they get the fireworks, right? So what we're doing with this course is is really trying to change those habits so that when the child presses the good behavior button, they get an explosion. I'm using explosion a bit dramatically, right? Because they don't need to get an explosion, but they need to get an energy, a flow of energy, right? Like that, yay, I noticed that you ate your supper, even though you really wanted something else, or you only asked 3 times for something different, and then you settled down and you ate it. And I noticed that that's quite hard for you, right? Like, and again, we're being genuine about it, because with empathy, some of these things are really hard for our kids. We're just trying to shift that pattern. And what we're eventually going to do is we're going to get to a place where we can fully shift the pattern that we for the bad behavior. All we have to do to get that to stop is to give a small reaction. But in order to do that, we first have to make this much more energetic. Okay, so that's just a roadmap of where we're going to go with it. But let me give you a scenario. Let's say your kid is doing schoolwork. They do one sum and then they throw their pen down. They're like, I can't do it. I'm terrible at maths. I never want to see a math thing again. I can't do it. It's all rubbish. I don't know how to do it, right? And it sounds familiar? Anyone? Yes. Just in this house, right? And you're like, hold on a second. Your teacher told me you're good at maths. You got like, I don't know, 5 out of in all of your homes, right? In all of your homes, I have a secret camera. I am watching, and I will use your examples in next week's class, right? And you're like, hold on a second. Teacher told me you're on level with maths. We did something yesterday. Yeah, you got 1 wrong, but you got lots right. Like, what on earth is going on here? So how on earth do you get your child to believe in themselves? So I'm going to throw that question out to you. And why it's important is not just when it comes to schoolwork, but when it comes to all areas of life. Like, at the end of the day, in order to raise successful adults, we want our children to have a healthy sense of self. We want them to believe in themselves. So how on earth do we get them to believe in ourselves? And I'll throw out a different example, right? Let's say you tell your small child, your 3-year-old, please put your socks in the washing basket, right? And they say to you, they look at you and they say, it's too heavy, and they cry. And like, this is a child that dragged their baby that's like, you know, three centimeters smaller than them across the room while you weren't looking, right? But their pair of socks is way too heavy to put in the washing basket. How do you get them to believe in themselves? Any ideas?
Both of mine are like that, with the maths example and also the washing basket. But with the math, things like the homework and the schoolwork, I feel like sometimes I'm talking them down off a ledge, you know, that they've sort of reached a tipping point. So I try to just calm them down first, and then sort of say to them, you know, let's just read it together, because both of them have a terrible tendency to not read a question. So just assume it's like the worst possible question and they couldn't possibly know the answer. So like I always say, like, let's just do it together. Let's just, you know, calmly read it and talk about it. And, you know, like you've done something similar, or we've got a video we can look at, you know, something like that, just to kind of put it in perspective, you know, that it's not the worst thing. And also like reiterating that they have to learn, you know, that we're all going to make mistakes, that nobody's perfect, and that you learn through making your mistakes. You know, I think that's like a really important lesson for them.
Yes. Yeah. So you raised a lot of points before. No one can hear until they have been heard, right? So if you're going to if your child is saying, I can't do this, I'm terrible at maths, etc., etc., until you have actually heard, until they know that you have heard, you're not going to get anywhere with that. And you can see this actually happen with children. And the truth is with adults as well. I don't know if we discussed this earlier in the course, but like, imagine it's your birthday, right? And your spouse comes home, and you know, you're waiting for the flowers, and you're waiting for the gift, and you're waiting for whatever else. And as they walk through the door, and as you know, the evening progresses, it becomes clearer and clearer that spouse has maybe forgotten that it's your birthday. Well, they only happen once, right? What's the best way to remember your spouse's birthday? Forget it once, right? So what happens is you realize, and like, they turn around to you and they say, what's the matter? And you're like, it's fine, right? Which is the worst thing, right? Then they realize, oh, I've forgotten something. And you're like, what's the date? And they look at the calendar, and then they suddenly was like, oh, it's your birthday. And you're like, yes, it's my birthday. And they're like, well, what's the big deal? You know, the Chinese restaurant has a special on tomorrow. We'll go tomorrow night anyway, right? Like, how do you feel about that? Great or not so great? So someone's sleeping in the doghouse tonight, right? As opposed to your spouse says, oh my goodness, I can't believe I forgot your birthday. Like, how could I do something like that? Which one do you prefer? Which one makes you feel better? The second one, right? Because when we feel heard, and if we think about it, that one of the greatest gifts that we can give to our kids is to help them feel heard, right? Is to actually listen to them. Now, obviously, if your child is telling you, I'm terrible at maths, it may not be the time to say, oh my goodness, you're terrible at maths. What are we going to do, right? But what we, at least someone gets my humor, right? So it's that may not be the right response, but on the other hand, what they're telling us and what we have to show them that we hear is that they are struggling with the maths, and we can tell them, I hear that you're finding the maths hard. It doesn't address what we're going to do with it, but it's the step number one. And I think about it this way: it's such a powerful gift that we can give our children. That's what I'm going to give you for this week's for the homework. Let me throw it out to you then, right? So let's take it to the laundry example, right? How would we show our child that we hear them?
I find this example easier than the schoolwork one, but again, I just say to them like, oh, it's really heavy to you. Well, maybe we can pick them up together or something like that. And then you're showing them that, you know, you'll work together with them at it.
Right. And again, I do realize that I'm leaving you here on a cliffhanger, right? Because, you know, when your child, let's say, says, I hate my sibling, right? What they're really telling you then is, you know, it doesn't happen in anyone else's homes, right? It's all love and like, oh my gosh, there's sweet pictures of them kissing as you know, as siblings, right? Like that's all that happens. Except I have those secret cameras, right? So what they're really telling you is I feel like I'm so frustrated, or that my sibling is driving me mad, or whatever, right? And I'm not saying just because we hear our sibling, our kids, doesn't mean we condone their behavior. Right? If your child is going to say, I hate my sibling, and then hit them over the head, that's not okay. You're going to have to teach them a lesson, right? That you can't hit. But what we have to understand is that the first thing, that before we can teach them that lesson, right? Before we can teach them, like, you can do this maths, all right? Or you can be helpful. We need to get them to a place where they can hear us, and no one can hear until they have been heard. So the first step, what I want you to work on this week, and perhaps not do it in places of conflict, right? Because I haven't given you the full tool of how to actually move them, right? So perhaps in places where they're just talking to you, right? But try and validate them. Just validate them. So I'll give you an example. If your kid reads a book, right, and they're excited to tell you about their book, the book, and they're telling you just to say, wow, it sounds like that book was really exciting, right? Perhaps not to do it in the places of conflict yet, because we'll get to it next week when I give you the full package of how you can do it. But it might be helpful, even in places of where you know you're trying to get them somewhere else, is to say things like, I could see this is hard for you. I could see this is frustrating for you. So try and do that this week. Try and just empathize and hear and validate our children.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, your questions for future episodes. And please take a moment, think about someone else who might benefit from this, and forward it on to them. If you enjoyed this podcast, you'll love my book, Living Beautifully, for more insights on how to bring meaning, joy, love into your life based on timeless Jewish wisdom. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, and please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out.